Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Mankamal Singh and I'm delighted to host a new show on KTV called A Sikh Perspective. We've come together to bring you a special show in English, a discussion show where every week we'll be discussing different current issues, topics that affect us all, but give a Sikh perspective, a Gurmat perspective, a perspective based around Gur Shabad, a perspective based around Gur Itihas and our history, and try and see it from that perspective. I have two panelists with me. They'll be regular panelists, and they're going to contribute to the show today. So I have on my left Tasveer Singh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
And Sukhbir Singh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Today we're going to talk about activism and Sikhi and how it entwines with each other and the links. We'll explore the discussion. I mean, the reality is the topic is being discussed because you could say we're at one of those peaks again that we regularly come across, where the Sangat is mobilizing, the Sikh community is having an interest again in issues in Punjab, particularly driven by the campaign to free Jagtar Singh Johal. And we see this come up every so often. We saw it several years ago with by Balwant Singh Rajwana when the hanging was announced and the mobilization of the global Sikh community. Then you can track it back, and we saw various different Satkar campaigns and Respect for Guru Granth Sahib Ji campaigns in mid-2000s. If you want to track it even further back, then obviously the 84 genocide. And then prior to that, we need to look at what activism really was before 1984, when it was about the Sikh identity, when it was about the turban, when it was about the dastar, when it was about the kakars, and it was about fighting racism and prejudice within the United Kingdom and other parts of the diaspora as well. So we're hoping to explore that whole discussion as best as we can today. If we look at the word activism and look at a definition of activism, it's a policy or an action using vigorous campaigning to bring about political and social change. Now, you look at our Sikh history, and I think we've got a vast amount of activism right from the moment Guru Nanak Dev Ji came on this earth through to where we are today, and it's a big part of our DNA and who we are. But often in the media, and often the perception that is pushed out there is that activism is given a label of radicalization, it's given a label of extremism, it's given a label of fundamentalism, loaded definitions, which we know the impact and the effects that kind of label actually carries. But what's particularly interesting is very recently, just a few weeks ago, Dr. Jasjit Singh of Leeds University released his research. It was sponsored by sponsored by Crest, which is actually the Centre for Research and Evidence on Security Threats. Now, Dr. Jasjit Singh looked at the term Sikh radicalization and actually looked at how it all came about, the context, the framing, and the reality of what Sikh radicalization actually is. And although I haven't read the report, I've heard his radio interviews and I've read the executive summary. What it alludes towards is that the term radicalization, it's a very loose term, and effectively what Sikhs have carried out in the UK over the past 5 or 6 decades has been activism, a level of activism to secure and safeguard the Sikh identity, as well as other issues that have a huge impact on Sikh psyche and Sikh lifestyles and Sikh emotions too as well. I'll turn to you, Tasveer Singh. Yeah. I mean, let's look at activism and let's look at it from a guru's perspective and who we are as Sikhs.
I mean, that's where we should start. And when you think about it, Guru Nanak Dev Ji. So when Guru Nanak Dev Ji went for their first Udasi, the first Guru Sikh they came into was Bhai Lalo, The shabad in their discussions was Jaisi mein aave qasam ki bani.
Mhm.
In that bani as well, in that shabad, there's more discussions about the way, the world which we're living in, the times which we're living in, which is off where truth is lost, where regimes will be evil, and so that's basically the first step towards activism, is giving that mindset that the Gurmukh has to understand that this is the environment, this is the world which they're living in, and within this is where these are the challenges which they have to face. That's the biggest understanding which I think the Guru has really given us.
Yeah, and it's almost like in what is termed a rational world. What your role as a Sikh is. I mean, during the time of the Gurus, I mean, the regimes were using excessive force. We know that. You know, we've heard the stories. But you know, in terms of how the Gurus overcame that and empowered the Sikhs.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So there's no those. You know, obviously, the time, that period that we're in now, we can see what's happening. We can see what's happening to people who want to speak about truth or bring forward information which is damaging or in some way embarrassing to the powers that be. But that wasn't any different in years gone by. There was certainly different in sophistication in how governments or powers deal with that situation. So, as Bhai Sahib said, you know, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, in very many ways, if you think about Sikhi as it began. I mean, you know, we call it a religion now, and it is a religion. It's a major world faith, but in very many ways, if we look at where Sikhi began and really its early days and right up until Guru Gobind Singh Ji, it was very much over those 200 plus years, was about changing the individual, but changing society through the individual. So rather than imposing upon society a new set of rules and this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do, because lots of faiths and lots of organisations or ideologies become quite prescriptive in what they tell people to do. Sikhi came at it from a different angle. It said, well, if you change the person, if you change that person, and you change how they think, how they feel, their aspirations, desires, motivations, if you can change that, then that will change society organically. And that's really, because that kind of organic change is what lasts and sustains. Anything that's imposed on people, it becomes like a rule-based system. And you'll always have people breaking rules like we break laws. But if people understand themselves, the negative aspects of doing that, then they won't do it. And I think Sikhi was very much about empowering the people. And also, you know, we've got to look at the world in which Guru Nanak was brought into at that point. How, you know, the area that he was in, where he was living, the society around him, the culture, what was it like? And he was, he was a revolutionary. I mean, the things he was saying then, you know, were absolutely the same sorts of things that would get you imprisoned, get you killed. You know, it was fearless and revolutionary to a point. In fact, you know, I can imagine people at the time probably looked at Guru Nanak and thought, you know, what are you doing? Literally, you know, because he wasn't playing to any power monopoly. He was saying the truth and speaking truth to power is what we talk about. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And he wasn't trying to play up to the Mughal rulers, if you will, and then trying to denigrate the Hindu faith, knowing that actually they're powerful and they're less powerful. There was no politics involved. This is the truth. So he had things to say about Hinduism, as in the structure as it stood, the practice at that time. He had things to say about the about the Muslim faith and how, you know. So he was fearless in his resoluteness to really speak, you know.
And the criticism was about individuals. Not necessarily. It was about practices. It was about certain structures that had dominated and held people back.
Moved away.
And it was. And I mean, we know the social. Barriers broke because, you know, we're a product of that social mobility that took place then. You know, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Guru Nanak gives you 10 things on his head. So, for example, where the priest would be the most important, would be most person in the society, he gave that power. He wanted to empower the householder. So the householder was the most important person, according to Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Yourself, you know, you can find your own salvation. You don't need to follow any of these rigid rules or anything like that. Much more of a clearer and simpler way of life.
Well, you can see the threats then, couldn't you? You could see those individuals seeing the threat in what Guru Nanak Dev Ji was telling people, not just the regimes, whatever, but just people who held control over others for generations, if not thousands of years, really. And breaking that system was a huge change. But, you know, why is it that as Sikhs we tend to mask that activism of Guru Nanak Dev Ji? I mean, you know, we like you said, we box and frame ourselves as a religion and a faith, but often, you know, we don't want to see ourselves as those activists. And certainly images of Guru Nanak Dev Ji that we have in our house,
much more softer.
Yeah, a softer image of an elderly individual, and not seeing that spark in who Guru Nanak Dev Ji was in terms of the activities. I mean, it'd be nice to see more paintings come out that way. But why do you think we're in this situation?
Sometimes I think it's the more palatable way of projecting a faith leader, a faith. Sometimes people think that if you dilute it, water it down, it's more easier to accept those kind of changes. I mean, I think that Guru Nanak Dev Ji was, you know, what they taught us. You know, what they taught us was genuinely a way of really standing up for yourself. So I think sometimes, you know, like for example, the Jagtar Singh Johal scenario, you know, in us there's a want. There is a want in every individual to stand up for some kind of injustice. And for us, especially what we, you know, as a community, what we've been through for so many years, again, you know, why do we have to keep going through this circular problem of either being targeted or being identified, or, you know, those kind of things. So
but then you can understand some people say it's often because you rock the boat. Well, you deserve it. I mean, I think mainstream look at you Sikhs and probably think, well, you're always rocking the boat.
Well, we'll only stay within that cycle as long as we stay true to our Guru. If we wanted to become just like everybody else, in the sense of we were willing to accept and compromise and be hypocrites, then that could stop tomorrow. That would never have arisen during the Mughal period, would never have arisen during the British Raj, would never have arisen post 47. So as long as we stay true to Sikhi, unfortunately, we're going to have to keep going through that cycle, because that cycle is really standing up for truth. And in a world which is riddled really with untruth, if we're honest, and that has been the case from Guru Nanak to the present period, then if you defend faith and you prioritize faith as the most important thing, and your religion and truth as the most important thing, then in that kind of environment, it's inevitable that you're going to keep rocking the boat. You're going to have to keep fighting. And that, I think, is, you know, almost, think of it this way, I think the day the Sikhs stop fighting, the day that you don't hear that Sikhs are standing up for something, then I think that's the day when we've moved too far away from Sikhi. In that case, it's Sikhi by name, but not in nature.
So the Bagi or Badshah scenario here is what's often put forward by folk singers and Dadi singers as well.
And as you say, you know, it is about monopolies controlling, wanting to keep their power. So as much as the regime, from a religious perspective, as you said, so we go to, you know, the time of Guru Arjan Dev Ji, while we went about the fifth Guru, and we're into a situation where, again, you know, they can see that this appeal of Sikhi has started to spread amongst the population. The Pandits, the Pujaris, etc., can start to see that their meal ticket, their way of life.
There's an infrastructure developing here.
Exactly.
There's institutes. There's
parallel kind of institutes developing, and they looked at that and they could see how that was very dangerous for them. And you know, you look at the parallels of that. Actually, I often think about, you know, if you think about Jesus Christ, you think about how his situation was. So his situation was, you know, he was upsetting the rabbis, you know, the Jewish priests, who were doing a similar thing to the Pandits, the Punjaris, in a sort of way where they had practice rather than actual faith, where you'd do certain things, you'd follow a ritual or do certain things on a particular day, and therefore, you know, good things would happen. So what they did, they approached the Roman authorities, because they couldn't do anything to Jesus themselves, and they said, look, this guy, people are calling him the true king, in the same way that Chandu then, you know, with regards to Guru Arjan Dev, he said, no, Sache Paatshah Kante, they call him the true king. And it was about prodding power that you couldn't use yourself, but using that to attack somebody else. And that's the scenario is exactly the same. And in both situations, they were both fighting for exactly the same thing, in the sense that, you know, both monopolies were trying to keep their power. Yeah.
And then, you know, we've just recently commemorated Guru Tegh Bahadur's Shahidi. You know, and I think, you know, we know that's a massive impact, and we know that had that not taken place, we know that the shape and the demographics of northern India, you know, would be very different.
Totally different. I mean, all at least northern India would have become Islamic, because it wasn't that you see what Aurangzeb was doing. It wasn't that he was converting necessarily the the Hindu on the street, what he was doing, he went to the source. He knew that the Kashmiri Pandits, they were sent.
The source of knowledge.
The source of knowledge.
Yeah.
These people, this was like a centre where if you train teachers, if you will, that's where they're being taught and trained. Then these people go out and disseminate that knowledge amongst the population. Now, if those teachers, instead of disseminating Hinduism, start disseminating Islam, then it's very clear what's going to happen. The whole of the north of India, certainly at least, would have become Islamic, and then what would have happened post-British rule? After the British had left, they would have said, okay, we're going to divide this country on the basis of populations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Down to here, past Delhi, is mostly Muslim. So here's the line now. And that's Pakistan, and Delhi's the third or fourth city, and the rest is left to the Hindus.
I mean, it's almost whitewashed out of Indian history. I mean, we many people have said that as well now, and in fact in Sikh history as well at the moment, it tends to be a Shahidi Purb that isn't maybe as marked as much as it should be, because it falls so close to Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Gurpurb, and that's a fault of our own as well. But I mean, that's something that we need to ensure that we rectify and do. But then let's fast forward this. I mean, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, it's there's so much we can talk about Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and we can't in this short show even touch upon that. But let's let him take it past Guru Gobind Singh Ji, when we started seeing activism when there were huge threats at that point in time, massive threats to Sikh identity, Sikh livelihoods. We saw individuals come up from the grassroots and lead, and we still remember these individuals. The Baba Deep Singhs, the Bhai Taru Singhs, the Bhai Mani Singhs. And those individuals, and what makes them different from the activists that came about in the 20th century.
And that's the power of them, isn't it? That's the power of them that we're talking about. And we're using individual names. So that's an individual. So we tend to think that one person, what can you do? Just goes to show you can inspire generations ahead of you. So even if we just look back to 1984 and that situation, I mean, the actions of the Sikhs that defended against the attack on the Harmandir Sahib, their actions will inspire generations way beyond our lifetimes. Had that not happened, had they not stood, then of course that wouldn't happen. And again, a part of it is of course Guru Nanak's message, but Guru Nanak's message has been reinforced by examples. You can have the greatest message in the world, but if nobody's actually going to back it up, then that's all it remains. But we get consistently, and what drives these Sikhs then to do what we do? Because in the terms of the world in which we live, surely we tend to, when I say surely, we tend to believe that looking after yourself, looking after your own self-interest, looking after your own family, your immediate family, acquiring wealth, moving through life, this is what is seen as a successful life and what we should seek to achieve. So what would drive somebody to go completely in the opposite direction of that and say, well, all those things are wonderful, I would like to have them, but I can't because there's something inside of me which makes me look at the world and say, this isn't right, and I have to do something.
I mean, in terms of us, let's take this even closer to times, even in the 70s and the 80s, where people were fighting for their rights, Sikh rights, the Mandla case and all those kind of things. That activism should be inspirational for us now, because that's a step. We are, with those things, we feel more comfortable and confident in this country.
Absolutely.
And without those kind of those kind of big steps which our elders took, we won't be sitting here feeling comfortable and confident to say we're ethnic race or we're strong. We're a part of this country.
And they came out of their comfort zones as well. That's what we have to visualize. The pressures that they were under. In order to overcome that, they came out of their comfort zones. They were out there. If protest was needed, it was a physical protest. It was a physical campaign in that respect, anyway. And they ensured that. I mean, even the buses, the right to wear the turban on the buses, the right to wear the turban while driving a motorcycle. All these kind of things. They went through a lot of pain to get there, and often it's like you said, it's easy for us to take it all for granted. We have similar campaigns now, whether it's ethnic monitoring, whether it's...
The same problems exist.
The
day-to-day issue for the Sikh will always be there. The same problems also have to be challenged against, really. And that's part of the psyche, I think, which the Guru gives us these, and we're going to see some of these things as blessings, opportunities for us to actually keep going. Keep that fire in our belly a bit. And again, this is what we're really about.
But then are we a community that goes through these peaks and troughs? Because we're almost like, for many of us, activism is something that you put in a box and you store away when you go back to bed again, or you store away for a period of time and then you bring it out again. But surely what we've talked about earlier on, is what the Guru's trying to instill in us, is that constant, that you are that Sikh, you will always make the right stand. I mean, activism is universal anyway. It's a universal value. It's not just a Sikh value, it's a universal value. Other people empathize with it, and look at the likes of Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Steve Biko. These are the names that are coming to me at the moment. I can't think of many more, but they're on a world platform. Unfortunately, on the world platform, on the mainstream platform, the Sikh names aren't mentioned. We know the Sikh names, we mention them in the Das, we talk about them in kathas, in the gurdwaras, we learn about them, we see the pictures.
See, you have to see certain things, there are certain things you have to see spiritually. And these opportunities, if you see them as seva, you will take it forward. If you see it as a burden, you'll put it under, you'll store it in a box and put it under your bed. So it's that kind of mindset which the Guru wants that mindset to have in the Gursikh. So the Gursikh has to think like this. This is my place in society. This is my role in society. To do these kind of things, to stand up for rights, to help others. The brotherhood, all those kind of concepts. They're there to keep us instilled. Beyond that, if we're not, it's your decision. It's like the Baba Deep Singh line. You draw the line. If you wish to go across it, it's your choice. If you don't, then you stay on the other side.
And it is a matter of choice if you think about it in that way as well. It's about the individual being empowered, as we said before, to make that decision and to take themselves forward and be that lead or be that person. You don't know where it's going to come from as well. I mean, I'm sure Jagtar Singh Johal or Jaggi never ever thought he'd be able to, he'd create a wave like this. He doesn't look like particularly the kind of stereotypical individual who you'd expect, like a Balwant Singh Rajwana, but he's created a huge momentum. His image has become it's become iconic. We're seeing social media feeds, we're seeing that picture, we're seeing artists draw him now, because it's instilling that spirit back in everyone again. That
could have been one of thousands. It could have been not anybody, but actually, I mean, with regards to Jagtar now, it's Jaggi. I almost said it could have been anybody. Well, that's the future going forwards, if we're honest. Because, I mean, what do we know about how the Punjab police, as an example, operate? We had a period in the 80s when they were saying, okay, we're getting militants, or we're arresting terrorists, or whatever else they wanted to call it.
Extrajudicial tactics.
Extrajudicial tactics. But then beyond that, what individual police officers were doing, and what police stations or police areas were doing, was using extortion, basically to get money from anybody. Now you can imagine a situation where literally anybody from anywhere in the world travels to Punjab. What's stopping the Punjab police saying, okay, we've got some emails from this guy on a particular Facebook page, or we found this in his luggage, we want X amount of money. So anybody that's watching this, anybody that thinks that, okay, Jaggi, all right, in a way he's compromised himself by being involved as an activist in any capacity, whether it's a blogger or somebody who just writes a couple of posts, he's somehow compromised himself. I'd say to them, think again, because it could just as well be you. The only qualification really is that you're Sikh, and you're going to have a little bit of money because you're from somewhere else.
Exactly. I mean, anyone who's vociferous with a voice, picked up. I mean, there's nothing. People in us as individuals, just this show or something like that being picked up and being used in that manner to create what needs to be created.
It's to create fear. And this is the thing, and this is where it comes back to Sikhi again. The fearlessness of Sikhi is what's kept the activism alive. The fear, because the fear is bullies use fear to shut you up, to close your mouth. And really, the thing about the Sikh situation, which is so galling, really, is that we're the victims, in the sense that we've suffered horrendous human rights abuses and atrocities against us. We've suffered a genocide. We suffered a genocide, which in itself is probably the worst crime that any people could suffer. And then on top of that, we're really being told, keep your mouth shut. You've suffered, you continue to suffer, but we don't need to say anything. You've got to keep your mouth shut.
And it is that, and and that's the situation that's arisen here. Look, we've run out of time. You know, again, it's one of those deep topics that could go on in a further discussion. But we'll be having more discussions like this on a weekly basis, and this is the kind of tone that we're going to set for this show. So please do join us again. We will have this weekly slot, and we will be regular faces that will come and talk to you about topical and current issues. So again, Tasveer Singh and Sukhbir Singh, thank you for joining me. Thank you, KTV, and we'll see you next week.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.